computer. All right. Hey, everyone. This is the retrospective for the Cluster API 1.5 release team. We adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct. So basically be nice to each other, treat people with respect, raise your hands if you want to speak. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So I think everybody's had a chance to look over this doc since last week. Feel free as we go through this to add new stuff. I think there's going to be potentially some action items that'll flow through out of this as well. And I think my plan is to let each person with their name speak to their points, and we kind of go that route. So unless there's any questions or things to bring up, I'll go ahead and let Killian start.
Thanks, Sean. So yeah, I think these are a couple of quick ones. Number one, great improvements to tooling, particularly the release notes tool. There was a lot of work done on that during this cycle. I think that's really important because that's the legacy any release team leaves to the next one is kind of in tooling and docs and process. So this, I think, just lessens the load. I think we've seen that throughout this cycle, like the load of writing the release notes and polishing them up was just massively decreased as we went through the cycle as this improved. So that was amazing. Next one is not entirely accurate. Oh, no. Now that I read it again, we didn't have all releases out on time. We missed one because we had the entire Prow CI went down, which was something that was somewhat unavoidable from our point of view. But in general, releases all went out on time in general. We're all in good shape. So that is the basic task that we had, and we met it, which was great. And the third one there, sorry, if anybody does want to add to anything I'm saying, I'm just running through them because I have the three together, but please put up your hand. Sorry. The third one, similar to the first one, but we had a bunch of smaller improvements to docs and practices around communicating releases, which I think is super important. So I think we put more focus on using the mailing list. And I think, yeah, that can be continued to be refined, but I think that's really important is how we actually express to the community and the rest of the stakeholders what we're doing, what's being released, and when we're doing it.
Yeah, so I'll go next. I've said this a couple of times and I'll say it again. I loved that we cut the testing tasks for the providers. I went and looked through all of them. Obviously, not every provider picked up the work, but I think about every provider at least gave some indication on when and where the work might get picked up, right? So a lot of the providers said, hey, we're working towards 1.4 right now, so we can't get to 1.5. Okay, cool. Like we know at least where you are. So we got a lot of really great feedback in my mind for where the providers sit as we continue to move forward. And I think this will be really interesting, especially as we continue this cadence to see how providers pick up the change as we move forward. So I absolutely love that. Can't overstress that enough. That was awesome. The other thing for me was everybody on the release team was able to at least lead one of the releases. I know that we had to rely on Killian quite a bit as the maintainer to do the write tasks, but everybody at least got to run through it once, which was amazing from the release lead team. I think if I'm not mistaken, most of the other teams had everybody doing tasks, so it wasn't just kind of a shadow. I know that's what some of our documentation calls it, but I think the maintainers and other release teams have kind of said, let's transition into team members instead of a shadow. So that way people feel like they're a part of the process and making changes. And so I think that was really awesome to see. And then lastly, for me, we did all of our stuff very publicly. I think in the last few early releases, maybe, we kind of did it over Slack and it was DMs, but public, but so the last few releases we did very publicly. Everything was in Zoom or in Slack. And so I know we didn't record those just because it was such a long drawn out process, but I think at least this way, everybody on the release team could see what was going on, and that helps distribute knowledge. And that's one of the main goals behind the release team. So I think we nailed that. Christian.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I don't actually know how it is called, but the headline is Kubernetes aggregated failures tool to track down which flakes are relevant to take a look at, because that was basically the first question we had. Which flakes are worth investing time? And it really is a great tool to track down which are the most occurring flakes, filter out things we already know, or create a filter to see if a flake is actually solved. Just wanted to mention that because it's maybe very helpful for the future teams.
And Nawaz, are you getting ready? Oh, you're just okay. Just want to make sure we didn't miss you there. So, anything else that anybody can think of that went well? There's a lot of stuff that went well. Anything anybody wants to call out? Cool. Things to improve on. Killian, I'll let you start as well.
Sure. First one here, I think, is something we mentioned. Joe just mentioned there. Is just that there's still a maintainer role. We formalized it during this release process, but it's still there to cut tags, cut release branches, a couple of other tasks. So this is actively being worked on. I know Cecile has a PR out to try to fix this with a GitHub action. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that fixed, but I think it was just something we should call out as something that needs to be improved.
Do you have a link by chance to that PR? I'd love to put it here. If not, I'll go search for it and add it later.
Yeah, I'll add it in a minute. So the next one there, yeah, there was just a couple of things that were missed. So one of them, this came to mind after the release pretty much closed. We forgot to update the GitHub actions when we were updating the rest of the CI stuff. So release 1.5 wasn't on that. It should have been done, yeah, much earlier in the cycle. Pretty much as soon as that branch was created, or at least on release day, we'll say, but when that branch is created, ideally. So it can be easy to miss these things because of the structure of our documentation, I think. But maybe for a future release team, it would be good to consider moving to more checklists where you have an aggregate issue, you have a list of tasks that need to be done, and you just put the PR beside the task, or GitHub has task lists now that are more like integrated versions of that, but basically turn into a checklist so it's harder to miss when something hasn't been done. For Kat, please.
Yeah, just a question. So I don't think I saw in the release tasks updating the GitHub actions. So that's why maybe we missed it, right?
No, it's definitely in there.
Yeah. So yeah, could you put maybe action items so that we don't miss for this release cycle? Because I opened the tracking issue for all the tasks for this upcoming release. I'll add it directly there probably. But what exactly we have to update there?
So I'm not sure, because usually I need to look at the tracking task, but usually the tracking task doesn't have like the granular mini tasks that we have for everything that's in our release task stock, right?
So real quick, let me just pull this up. We have, I think they're closed, but give me just 1 second here. I apologize. So we have this that's been, I need to close this. But basically it has a checklist for week over week, but I think there's not the GitHub action in this one. So it's
not there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is in that it's part of week 15 set up jobs and dashboards for release 1.4 release branch.
Yep.
So it's a subtask. So this has like 8 or 10 points under it. Yeah. And it's a subtask under there is where this task actually sits. So yeah, I'm not sure what would be the best way. Maybe it's to make this more granular, or maybe to make sub issues that are more focused on each team, so that it's not all on one big umbrella issue. But it's something that I think can happen. There was another couple of things that were missed and we caught late or did out of order during the cycle. So it'd be good to think ways to prevent that in the future.
I like that. I think this checklist was very, very helpful at a high level. But you're absolutely right. Like I don't know what all needed to be in there without clicking through it and reading through it a couple of times. And just the amount of stuff that was happening, I think on week 15 was a lot. So, you know, one thing, I don't know if we want a week over week checklist, right? I don't know. Forgot. This is kind of going to be, you think through it, since you're 1/6 release lead. But for me, if I didn't have the checklist, I definitely would forget stuff. I checked this every time we got ready to do a release personally. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. My question was really like what we have to update in the GitHub Actions, because yeah, I know there is Golang Salient version that we frequently update, but that's like periodically, as I know, whenever there's a new release. And there's a Go version, I think, that we update. And that's why I was asking like if we have like specific list. And but yeah, I'll go through it and then add it to the tracking list that we have.
So just to clarify, so those actions that are mentioned specifically on that point, so it's point 5 on the list we're looking at in front of us. So weekly image scan, weekly MD link check, and weekly test release. They all work on a matrix of release branches. So what we need to do here is once we cut a release branch, we need to add the new release branch. So we didn't add the release 1.5 to these checks until after release 1.5 was already out, and it should have been done when we cut the branch. A separate task then, I guess, because we would do this while in this last cycle, for example, release 1.3 was still in support, we would need a follow-up task to remove release 1.3, which we have a task to delete all jobs. It might be under the repair main branch for next release cycle, I believe. So it would be like week 1.
Oh,
week 2 or something.
Prepare main branch.
Prepare main branch, yeah. So maybe we need to add a task under there to remove support for the older versions. But yeah, so that's what needs to be updated, is just the specific branches that these actions run on. And I'll add in the PR as well.
All right. Thanks. We'll make sure to include those. And the upcoming one, can you please put some notes, Joe, so that we don't forget?
Yes. What would you like it for the action item?
Yeah, please. For the GitHub Actions, or I can do it.
Okay. That was it. Week 15. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think let's move this right. Like, I don't know what the solution is. I'll just kind of put hey, this is what we talked about, right? Like maybe a checklist is good, maybe honestly, I don't know. Cool. Yeah. Killian, you've got one more.
Sure. So this is about stuff, particularly for the 1.5 release. So as we work through the betas and the release candidate releases, but I think equally it goes for the point releases of currently released minor versions. So there's a number of pieces of boilerplate that might be different between these releases. So in the 1.5 release, we had Kubernetes versions that we support. We had a specific deprecation notice for our API versions. And we also had, let's say later on the release cycle, we had highlights of the release. I'm not sure what else was in there, but there might be something else I'm missing. And these are pretty much written manually at the moment, or what we tend to do is maybe create them once, then try to copy and paste them. There was definitely parts that were missed. I think in this release cycle, we had highlights. We preferred highlights in beta 0, but they didn't make their way into any of the following releases. We had our Kubernetes support was wrong in 1 or 2 versions of the release notes that we put out there because of copying and pasting. And I think maybe a solution to this that the communications team could look into this cycle is to create a template so that we create this boilerplate once by PR. We update it, for example, when the Kubernetes version is updated, we update it in that template. And then we don't have to keep wondering about copying and pasting stuff. Where does different text come from, particularly as things cycle through? So to essentially make the release notes generation work off a Go template. This is what the upstream release notes tool does today. So again, another chance to maybe look at that and see if there's a possibility of moving towards using the upstream release notes tool. But at the same time, it's fine to re-implement this stuff. It's fairly generic behavior if we want to customize it. But yeah, I think that would help with our like copy paste errors and with tracking through things like Kubernetes version, highlights, and then specific notes we want release notes readers to get. Like 1.6 will also have a specific deprecation notice for API versions. We want to make sure that's very clear throughout all releases.
Yeah. Sorry. Was someone want to talk? I don't know if I interrupted.
No, I was just gonna say, did all that make sense to you? I know you're the comms lead for the 1.6.
It totally does. In fact, I have another entry in the list that is basically the same thing. I just didn't know when I read it if it was the exact same thing. I was like, I might as well just write it down. So I agreed with everything that Killian said. I will add though, maybe short term, what we can do is having a checklist for the release date for the comms team. It's like, these are all the manual edits that need to be done, right? One can be multiple areas. Make sure that all the multiple areas are addressed. Missing areas, make sure that all of them are addressed. Kubernetes versions, make sure that this is in the template. Just because creating that template or that checklist is probably pretty fast, pretty easy, and we can even do it on the first release. And then in the meantime, we can have someone doing the automation, the coding part. I was thinking that that's probably the safest way to do it instead of waiting for the automation, which might come maybe too late in the release cycle for us to enjoy the benefits of this. Is that sensible?
Makes total sense. I'm a very like, let's get it done person, and then like we can come back and clean it up. So I love that idea. And then you've got 2 more, yeah.
Let me reread them. Yes, so the first one, the one that is duplicated is the one in the middle. So I'll read the first one and the third one. Although we automated a lot, and I think that was great, and it definitely seems like it saved a lot of time compared to all the stories that you guys told about previous cycles. It still seems that we need a bunch of manual intervention. And maybe this is impossible to automate, it's impossible to fix. I do believe, this is the second part that I wrote there, that adding this restriction where area labels need to be added before merging will probably improve the quality of the area labels that we have, which I believe most of the edits that we needed were around area labels. So I think that's going to improve the situation. But still, it seemed that there were, on release days, there were still a bunch of edits that we needed to do. Oh, this was the wrong area, or like, there are multiple areas here and there should only be one, or the area is missing here, but it shouldn't because we actually have an area. And I'm here looking mostly at you, Kilian. Sorry to put you in stop on the spot, but you were the one doing most of those edits, and you, unfortunately, you were the only one with the knowledge to determine this is right, this is wrong. So I guess maybe this is more a question for you. Do you think there is something, even if it's long term, right? The automation of the area labels took a couple cycles. Maybe if it's something like that, that's the matter. It doesn't need to. We don't need a solution right now. But do you think there is something that we can do to keep iterating on this? So first, we need less manual intervention, and second, we have less dependency on maintainers.
Yeah, I think the work on this is already started, and you've called it out, is number one, blocking based on the area label. I know there's a PR up on test infra to implement that right now. I don't see any barriers to getting that merged soon. I think it's worth calling out again at the community meeting this week, and then let's merge it, move on and see. The barrier after that, I think, is mostly around how do we properly communicate to contributors how to correctly set labels. And I think 75%, 80% of our contributions are probably from people who are very comfortable working the CAPI community and will either already know the areas or will learn them pretty quickly. And it's kind of like, how much of a barrier are we creating for the last 20%, and whether or not that does just fall on maintainers and reviewers then. But I think we have to see how that goes. But I think that will stop a huge amount of the manual changes, and then there'll just be little polishing things. Like, I think there's an umbrella release notes tool improvement task that just has, I know we did a few of them over the last few weeks, like sorting and consistent capitalization and stuff. But yeah, I think there's been massive improvements in this, and I think forcing the area label to be added while the PR is still in flight is the biggest change and the most helpful for these manual kind of checks and fixes we had to do during it. One of the other things I will say, we had one automatic area label placement for the last release cycle, or was in place for most of the last release cycle, which was under cluster cuddle. That did not work well because everything that touched the cluster cuddle code was marked as area cluster cuddle, which meant, and a lot of things might just randomly touch that part of the code without it being significant, which meant that a lot of things were marked as cluster cuddle. So we went back at the very on release day essentially, and took off a number of those. So it would be interesting to see in future if somebody's able to come up with a good way to automate area labels on the repo using the auto labeling feature that does exist. It is there based on owner files, and we can do it based on regexes. But yeah, I don't know if there's a good way to do that today. I think let's merge the enforcing area labels on PRs thing. Let's see how we get on. Maybe the next step is to reduce the number of area labels, but I think that's definitely in the hands of the current release team. See how it goes, and then make proposals to the community.
Johannes.
Yeah, according to this, I remember that when I was adding these labels manually, that you should also do it on the cherry pick PRs. I don't know if there's a possibility for Pro to actually take over the labels from the initial PRs. I don't know if it's fixed already, but I think it was an issue in the past. So the labels had to be added to the original PRs, but also on the automated cherry picks, I think. Yeah.
Real quick, sorry, Guillermo. On the area labels automation, is it possible, and I don't know, this is what I'm asking, to have it, yes, it touched cluster cuddle, but it also touched API, and then it would have cluster cuddle and API, or is it going to just be one?
It's possible to have it, that would be the default behavior.
Okay.
Would be that it would have multiple area labels.
Okay.
But for some of the PRs we're talking about, let's say we had the one that deprecated APIs or whatever, It just touches so many packages that we would get 10 area labels possibly. And that's probably less useful than 0 area labels in some ways.
Is that added after the PR is merged or at the time of PR creation?
As the PR is created and updated, I'm not sure how often the job runs, but it does change the life cycle of the PR before merge. So as the PR is updated, new area labels are added. I'm pretty sure old ones are also taken away, depending on what piece of the code it touches.
Yeah, Guillermo.
Yeah, I was gonna answer what Johannes asked, and that is true. That has been a little bit annoying this last cycle, because even if authors added the labels to the area label to the original PR, then the cherry picks never had it. So when we were, especially for the first 80% of the recycle cutting patch releases, we had to move all of those manually. I would say it would be ideal if the cherry pick bot did that transfer for us. But since we are going to animation to block the PR from merging if it doesn't have the label, that will also apply to cherry picks, right? Which now puts the annoyance instead of on us, on the maybe either the author of the cherry pick or the maintainer who's going to merge it, right? Because they will need to add the same label before being able to merge it. Now, my take here will be that's removing work from us, and it's removing the possibility of making a mistake from us. I will just wait and see how the community feels about that. And if they think that is a lot of work, then we can start thinking about automating it. Personally, I don't think it's a big deal to just type again area blah 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 when you're doing the looks good to me and the okay to test in the cherry pick. But it's definitely something that we could explore if the community said that is adding too much work. Although I don't there are that many cherry pick PRs to make this kind of work worth it, but that's just my personal opinion.
On the topic of area labels, there is an old PR of mine around adding area label to the template, but Stefan's got some comments here, so I've added it to the notes to potentially add it to a bot and have the bot at least, I don't think it's going to be blocking, but it will it'll annoy the author to say like, hey, add your area label. And so if it's not a whole lot of work, I think that's the route that Stefan wants to go. Christian, it looks like you've got some insider knowledge here as well. So I think it sounds like that's probably the more correct answer to move forward, is allow the I guess Prowbot or something to do this.
That's a good point, Joe. I'll send you a link later. Well, I'm gonna try to find and put it in the chat. But the PR, I don't remember who was, but someone new in the release in the comms team, the PR that they're doing in test infrastructure to make sure that we block the PRs, will post a message when the area label is missing. And there's a YAML configuration. I was just saying, if you could go there and then suggest whatever messaging you guys were discussing in your PR, maybe we can just go add it there, and then we get that for free. Because he already has a message that says you need to add label, blah, blah, blah. But if you guys already discussed like the proper messaging, maybe we can just put it there.
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't anything specific. I think, yes, we can totally add that. I think Christian, yeah, I think you called it out. Like we should just here's an example of all the area labels just in case, right? That's all it needs to be, just to make sure that whoever's doing it may not have an intimate knowledge of all the area labels. So there you go, link to it, good enough. Cool. Yeah, if you can send me that, then I can do that, and I'll close out this PR and just say, hey, I think it's already done.
Sorry, isn't it we need both of them, because you are touching the pull request template, so whoever opens it knows that he or she has to put a label.
So
like before opening, because what Guillermo is suggesting, that that comes after you open a PR. So once you open a PR, Probot comments that it needs a label.
Yeah, I would agree. Stefan's basically said, let's not make the PR template larger, and this would make this a little bit larger. So basically, by having the automated task come back and say, hey, fill this out, that's the route that he's suggesting. So feel free to jump on that ticket and have a conversation. But that's what's being suggested right now is the PR template will not change, and then we'll have some sort of automation that comes back after the fact and updates you. So
yeah, sounds good. And on the second one, adding a label on the cherry picks, actually we have currently improvement tasks, which is similar to that, where we were thinking of tagging cluster API release team, GitHub team, like handle, to be tagged on the cherry pick PRs automatically. So it's kind of same as, you know, labeling the cherry picks PR. So anyways, both of these things are currently manual we have to do. And they are kind of related. So both of them have to be done by the Probot. One is tagging automatically the release team, and the other one is just adding a label. So I just thought like they're related. Probably someone who picks up one of them, the second one should be easy.
Christian, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the previous one again. That's basically what Foucault said is what I wrote to on top of Stefan's comment. From perspective of me creating a pull request, in best case, I just create a pull request, already add the label, and I as release team, being part of the release team, when I created pull requests, even I forgot it and got bugged by it. Then later on, and some of you added it, or I remembered later on. In that case, with the bot, it's one better. But from UX perspective, I think it's better if me as creating the pull request and I know which area it has to be in, would be good to get the pointer in the pull request template. But I'm totally okay with not having it in there. I'm also okay with the bot, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounds like we're going to have a little bit of a conversation around this change. So yep, so it is here's an action item. I'll keep on it, obviously, and then we'll have that as an action item to try to make that a little bit better. So awesome. Guillermo, did we? Oh, I think the last one's the announcements.
Yes. So real quick, I think there are 2 or 3 different types of announcements. When we have a patch release, when the email that we have to send as well, things like that. I think the weekly updates are automated already, so that's not a problem. But what I found is that, as far as I know, maybe I missed it, but we don't have necessarily a template on how to format those messages and the information that is contained there. For me, that hasn't been a problem, but I was just wondering if having something predetermined, and I don't think we need to be prescriptive if someone wants to change it or wants to give more information or less information, but it might help folks who don't feel, you know, fully comfortable writing the message from scratch to offer this as volunteers to do this work, because it's better scoped and there is less, you know, less room for a mistake, which I know that especially when you're new to a community, go in front of a lot of people in Slack and posting a message that my container, etc., can be a little bit frightening. So I wanted to put it for everyone and see if having templates for this kind of thing, which kind of we already do, because basically what everyone did is look for the last message, copy paste and modify it. But I was wondering if having this as an official template might help folks, or if there are any concerns doing something like that.
No objections from my side, at least. But as you mentioned, I think we need at least 2. Might be more. 1 for patch and 1 for minor release, right? And I think that makes sense. Rather than going and finding the old one and changing it, probably we should have like one centralized place where we can just change the things accordingly. And yeah, it makes sense. I was also wondering if upstream Kubernetes does that. I know most of the emails that I got are kind of same, but I'm not sure if they have really template somewhere. I can check and come back probably.
So
Because if they have, we could have something like that also.
So one of the ideas I think early on in the 1.4 release was to not have it committed, and I don't recall why, but it was being pushed back to have things committed into the repo for things like this. But I think there's probably obviously a good reason for it. And so one of the things that we ended up doing was having most of our stuff in HackMD. I think you all did HackMD as well for our 1.5. So at least we have some rudimentary templates that we can then take and say and put that into the code repo. And I think most of the maintainers would probably be okay with that, especially given that we're trying to automate a lot of this process or make it less friction, right? Awesome. Yeah, so two things. What could have been improved? I just felt like I didn't do a lot. I was running around, helping where I could, but I just didn't have as much time as I would have liked to help improve. So one of the things that I definitely dropped the ball on was trying to get the automation around removing the maintainers. We spent some time on it, ran into kind of a wall, and had to kind of help move things forward. I think Cecile jumped on it and probably has a release lead change that is going to be well better than whatever I could have made. But I just didn't feel like I got enough done. The team, I still think we did a great job, but I wish I would have had done a little bit more as an IC. That drives me nuts. The other thing is we have some flakes that are known, and I think we have some intimate CI knowledge, which is good. And I think maybe we can never get off of having some intimate code knowledge on the CI team. But one of the things that I think we might need to improve or try to figure out is like, hey, if Killian's not on the team, do we have enough intimate CI knowledge to make changes, figure out what is flaky, what's not flaky, and are we comfortable saying we're ready to go forward, right? So just having that intimate knowledge makes it a little bit more difficult, I think, to know when you can move forward. I don't have a solution for it. It's just something that I noticed. I just always ask if we have flakes. And yeah, and was.
Hey, Joe. So just adding to the point which Guillermo raised a couple minutes ago, I think we also want to standardize the weekly announcements. I think there was a little bit of unsurety what sort of announcements we should be going ahead, especially with the weekly format. So I think we definitely need a template for that. Not just a template, we also need to know if we really want to take it forward or not, because there were some times where we forgot to publish it altogether. So I think that's one thing which we could discuss, or maybe the comms team could discuss and come up with a resolution.
Yeah, and that's, I think, when you all came on, we had that same discussion of is it worthwhile or not. And I think, yeah, that's a great question to pose to the community as well, right? That could be a thing we talk about tomorrow. Just, do people like it? Do people not? And figure that out. Cool. We have about 15 minutes left. Just real quick, so just a couple of action items. I've been trying to jot them down as we go. If I missed anything, I apologize. So we need to follow up on this release lead change to remove the maintainers. I don't know if it's an action or if it's going to be a role. I personally don't know. It sounds like some of you guys might might know more, but follow up. Obviously, for Cot, you're probably going to follow up on that to figure out what can be done as this next release. Yep. So make sure that we have the action items for the GitHub actions to address the things that were brought up as missed. So this would be the second one as well here. These two were the missed ones. So make sure we get the signal through the noise of our documentation. Maybe create some release notes templates in the code or somewhere else. I need to personally follow up on this area label thing to figure out where we need to go forward on this, or if we're going to rely on infrastructure bot or something like that. I don't really know. It sounds like the cherry pick thing is probably not an action item, maybe for Cot, because you're saying that you'll all be tagged on it and you have to address that anyway. So maybe this is a non-action item since there's something to address this. So comms, create a release announcement templates and commit that possibly into the code. And then lastly, pull the community on weekly updates. Overall, this was awesome. Like, I think it went really well. We had a lot of engagement. We've had some people drop out to have other things come up, but I think overall communication amongst the team, at least from my perspective, has been very good. And I think everybody did a fantastic job. So thank you all.
Thank you too, Joe.
You guys did great. So hopefully get to see people at KubeCon in North America. Maybe that'd be fun to hang out and chat. All right, unless there's anything else, I'm gonna stop the recording.